anytime you get to talk about Chris Farley is a good day, man.
Well, Lottie frickin' God!
Funniest guy ever. It was nuts.
When I walked through Chicago with him, oh my God, there's Chris Farley, there's Chris Farley, there's Chris Farley.
Everybody cries for this, right?
Don't give up. Natural ability, it's just natural.
I haven't had sex with a woman.
I don't know how that works.
Make like an egg and beat it.
And he was infectious, and he was kind, and he was a puppy dog.
He was this boy that wanted to do good, but then there was this other side of him. So his whole life was this constant battle.
Success in show business does not always create the best version of people.
And also thinking that you have the physical capacity to handle it. Was, you may think that you can handle it.
It's not gonna change me. I'm gonna do the same old Chris. Yeah. Nothing's gonna happen.
It's a tough thing to deal with that kind of fame when you're that famous. And if it happens fast, it's almost lethal.
You can't walk around being funny all the time. You have to be yourself sometimes, and you have to be alone sometimes.
But you don't die at 33, it doesn't happen.
It comes up in something in my mind every day. And I think it will forever.
The poor world only got to see this part of the iceberg that is Chris.
It may not be Ken doll, but it comes together and it's extremely attractive.
This is the physicality. You saw his quality as an actor there.
You know, when everybody's deciding who's the funniest, you go, Farley was the funniest.
Our generation was into him.
And Chris just stops and he turns to me right at the edge of the curtain and goes, "This is what we're gonna do for the rest of our lives."
There's a category of people that I work with that are infuriatingly talented. As long as they're in this world, I think you always recognize whatever it is when you see it. You're always drawn to that.
Welcome, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you. How are you guys doing today?
Not bad. Just gonna hope I don't fall over in this chair or break it.
Your brother did that on Letterman.
Yeah, he already did that. Yeah. I can't do it as well.
You guys were telling me earlier about how you screened the movie in Madison, Wisconsin last night, and I hear that went well.
It went great. Yeah, we did it at the Orpheum Theater in Madison, Wisconsin, for about 1,000 people, and it went great.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. Whole Farley family was there.
The whole gang was there. Mom was there. Tom, Barb, everybody. So they all saw it for the first time, and it was great.
What did the family think?
They hated it. No, just kidding. No, they loved it. They thought it was great, and they were very, very excited. You know, it was nice. It was an emotional night, but it was good.
So let's start at the beginning. Tell me about how this documentary came to be. I mean, obviously, Chris has been so beloved for so many years. So why now, and how did this happen?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, it's just to say we, Brent and I were looking at, subjects and films we wanted to do, and we were talking about comedy, and Chris Farley's name was, right at the top of the mountain, and we reached out through a mutual friend, David Reeder in Los Angeles, and he set up a meeting with Kevin, and really took 2 or 3 meetings to walk through what the vision for the film was and the fact that we wanted to celebrate Chris's life. And once that trust was there, Kevin opened up the door and said, "Come on down to Madison." And a year ago in June, we were in Madison rolling camera.
How was that trust built? Because I know that people have wanted to make documentaries before about Chris, and I know the family was maybe a little hesitant to do something. So,
well, there's been a lot of different biographies on Chris through the years, and none of them have been really authorized. And I wanted to do something where it was respectful, and it was done by people that knew and loved him, and knew him well and worked with him the best. And so I wanted to go from that angle and create a movie that was honest but respectful. So, and I think that we accomplished that thanks to these guys.
Yeah, for sure.
What were some of the biggest roadblocks in making the film? Biggest challenges?
Dealing with Brent.
Oh yeah, definitely dealing with Brent. Whoa.
No. I'd say it was probably just lining up the schedules of some of these guys. And that's Derik Murray, Network Entertainment, and Spike. These guys, the tenacity that they have. Everyone wanted to pay tribute to Chris. You can see the cast in this film. Mike Myers, Dan Aykroyd, Spade, Sandler, everyone. They all wanted to play their part in this film. And it was just lining up schedules, which I'd say was probably the toughest.
These are very busy people, you can imagine. And, the cast that we had was incredible. And to Brent's point, we wanted to tell Chris's story through the eyes of these people, through the experiences they had with Chris, the time they spent with him. And I think that's really the charm and the beauty of the film is the cast.
No, it's great. I mean, you get obviously Lorne Michaels. You even go deeper. You get Bob Odenkirk and Brian Stack. These kind of like inside comedy guys. But you also get some really interesting people. You get Chris's summer camp theater director from the summer camp you went to in Wisconsin.
Richard Wenzel, yeah.
Richard Wenzel, and you get like rugby teammates from college that aren't even particularly famous now. Was it hard to track these guys down, and was it strange for them to come back and remember Chris in this way?
Yeah, I think it still stings for a lot of people, and it's still hard to talk about because people loved him so much.
Right.
So I was grateful for Mike Riley and certainly Matt Foley, Father Matt Foley.
Yeah.
And also Gene Graham, guys that we went to Marquette with and played rugby with back in the day.
Yeah.
And I was grateful that they stepped up and told their stories. It was nice to see.
Yeah.
And Mike Riley contributed a great song at the end of the film, in the beginning of the film, called Born on Fire. It's an excellent song.
Yeah.
And I don't know if any of you guys know this, but motivational speaker Matt Foley is actually named after one of Chris's friends, college buddy, who's also his priest, is named Matt Foley. Father
He's
Matt
a priest.
Yeah, and he shows up in the movie.
Yeah.
He shows up in the movie. He's a priest. It's a reveal. Yeah, it's great.
And I hear he actually came to the screening in Madison last night, and he's probably going to become a celebrity soon. You guys think?
That's what I said. I don't know if you're ready for this, but you might be different after Monday.
He's your guest next week coming onto the show, I'm sure.
Yeah, exactly. Was there anyone you wanted to get that you couldn't get, either because scheduling or other reasons?
It was actually interesting because Chris had such an impact and had so many close friends and people he worked with in the entertainment business. So we had we went wide. There's no question. Yeah. But really, at the end of the day, we have this incredible cast, and really, what it was all about was within a certain finite period of time, could we find a moment in time where we could interview them? All these guys, movies, TV shows, traveling all over the world. I mean, it was an incredible matrix to put it together. There were certain folks that, we tried to reach out to try to, and they were, responding, but we just couldn't make it work from a schedule point. But my God, what a cast.
Yeah, that's great. There's a chapter in the film where you talk about Del Close and Chris's years at Second City and how kind of influential Del was in Chris's career. For those who don't know, maybe explain who Del Close is and talk about, what Del's blessing meant for Farley in his career.
Right. Del ran the Improv Olympic in Chicago along with Sharna Halpern, and at the time, Del was a part of the beginning of Second City in Chicago and the beginning of the improv movement, really. And from that improv movement, Tina Fey, Amy Poehler, Bill Murray, Dan Aykroyd, it goes on and on and on and on. From the influences of comedy. And Del was in the beginning of it all, and he was the guru of improvisational comedy, and he was so instrumental in so many people's careers, Belushi, Murray, Chris. And his philosophy for Chris was to attack the stage and to be aggressive and not hold back your basic instincts of comedy, and just don't hold back and commit 100% to the character. And if you do that, the audience will be on your side, and the audience will be there, right there with you. And that's kind of his philosophy, and I think that still continues today. And a lot of the comedians you see, he has a huge influence on them.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's really meaningful that, Del kind of handpicked Chris to join the team. Kind of almost, he jumped the line. Like, there were other people who maybe were a little resentful or had been around a little longer.
Yeah.
And, Del kind of just gave him the blessing. And then he jumped to SNL pretty quickly and moved to New York. Tell us about that experience, about Chris, a young kid who's never been to New York City from the Midwest, and just all of a sudden being in the middle of it.
Right. I think Chris, it says in the film, too, he's not a great writer. He wasn't and a lot of people in SNL are from Harvard, and they're very brilliant, And he was a little intimidated by that. But I think he understood where his brilliance was, which was he could make a sketch better. He wasn't going to come up with it, but he could make it better, And I think that's what he was afraid, though, of intimidated by a lot of the brains that are around SNL.
Yeah.
It's a great moment in the film as well with Lorne Michaels. First of all, Mike Myers saying, I got a job at SNL, and they asked me who else was good at Second City. And, I shared with him there were a lot of guys great at Second City, but Chris Farley was at the top of my list. And very shortly after that, Lorne Michaels made the pilgrimage down to Second City, saw Chris Farley. The rest is history.
Yeah, I just think New York is a big city coming from Madison, you know, and he was just kind of a Midwestern kid, and he didn't know anything about New York. He certainly didn't know anything about television. He just knew he could make people laugh. So it was intimidating. But then by the end of his run, he really kind of liked New York, and he liked being on the show.
Yeah. And there's a great part where his cast members from that time are talking about how whenever hosts would come on, they'd be like, I want to be in a sketch with that guy.
Yeah.
Put me in with that guy. Because you saw the way he lit up a sketch and the way he would light up the screen. Tell us about some of the people who, just were obsessed with Chris Farley back then. You got Christina Applegate and all these great people.
Well, and everyone that we interviewed, it had some kind of fan story about him.
Yeah.
Bob Odenkirk got to write with him. Like, Bob Odenkirk got to write with him. He's one of the most prolific writers we have in our time. And yeah, Christina Applegate, Jay Moore, Will Sasso, we were talking about him the other day, and how much of a fan he was. He knew every sketch that Chris had been in, even some of the small ones.
Yeah.
He was loved by everyone.
Yeah, Will Sasso was talking about how he was lucky he got to, when Will was in high school, got to see Chris Farley on TV because it basically inspired him to become Will Sasso.
Yeah.
Yeah. Was there anything in doing these interviews that you learned that you didn't kind of already know, or like something that surprised you?
Well, there's a sketch that he found, Dante, which is one of the funniest things I've ever seen, and I never knew Chris did that. And then some of the stories Mike Myers told, I never knew, I've known all the stories, but some of the stuff that Mike said, I'd never heard of. They're pretty crazy stuff. And Dante is hysterical.
Yeah,
I love it.
For those who don't know, it's an SNL skit where Chris plays a fashionista, and for some reason he just keeps kicking everybody out of the room. He kicks David Spade out, and then Adam Sandler comes in as a FedEx guy, and he kicks him out.
Kicks out Bob Saget.
Kicks out Bob Saget for no reason, just kicking everyone out.
Yeah, it's hysterical.
Were there any stories about Chris that were just too crazy that you had to cut from the film? Or
I think every single cast member had a naked story about Chris Farley. Every single one. We put a few in. There's at least 4 or 5 in there.
A few, but there's a lot more that we can't really say.
It starts off with him in typing class in high school, typing with his penis, and it kind of works, spirals upward or downward from there.
It's funny because it's almost like you could have built the whole film around stories about him getting naked, because it starts, as you say, with that typing class. And then later, I think it was David Spade, or who was it? Maybe it was Mike Myers, talking about taking showers at SNL, and Chris Farley would tuck his business in between his legs, and then just start hugging and humping during the
jumping in the shower with Mike Myers.
Yeah, right. That is
every week, by the way, not just once.
Was he? I mean,
that'll scar you.
Well, I was gonna say you have some insight into this because you grew up with him. Was he like that at home?
He did that to me every night. I was like,
Talk about scarred.
Yeah, talk about scarred. No, growing up was like, I look at it like having the Tasmanian devil in your basement. You're just like, okay, what are we going to do with this guy? Yeah, we would have, he wasn't a real studier, and I was trying to get through class, and he would knock on my door, and I'd be like, well, yeah. And he'd be like, what are you doing? I go, oh, studying. I got to get through school. And he'd be like, well, why? And he just always wanted to play and do something else. I'm like, he just didn't like to study or read or do anything like that.
I think that's a good point as well, is that the movie, and that was so important to come to Madison and interview Kevin and his brothers and sister, was to really get to know Chris from the early beginnings. And because we had access to the family archive, we have these crazy home movies, the great photos from his photo album. And then we have this whole opening to our film that goes through these step-by-step stories of Chris in elementary school and in high school and up to university. And it's wacky, it's crazy. And what you learn is that Chris Farley didn't sort of at 18 or 19 or 20 go, hey, I think I'm going to study to be an improv artist. This guy was born Chris Farley from day one in Madison. It started with Kevin and the brothers and sisters, and it just kind of went from there. I mean, he was born on fire, as Ike said in the song.
The great song, because it's true. He was born on fire. He was born that way, just kind of like always goofing off.
Yeah, and those are great scenes and great stories from, like your mother talking about how at the dinner table he was just the entertainer. He was basically hosting dinner as if it was a late night talk show.
Yeah, he was. Yeah.
And how influential your father was in his comedy and him wanting to get into comedy.
Yeah, I think he always wanted to make Dad. If Dad laughed, he knew it was funny. So that was his goal. Even on SNL, was just he knew Dad was watching at home, and he would just try to make him laugh.
Yeah. During the film, when you talk to a lot of people start welling up and getting to tears. And I'm always curious, behind the camera, is it hard to also not tear up when people in front of the camera are?
Oh, for sure. I mean, it was very emotional. Chris Farley died 18 years ago. He would have been 51 this year.
Yeah, 51. Yeah.
So for a lot of these guys, they came in and they're reliving SNL again. They're reliving moments they had with Chris, and yeah, it's emotional for us. It's emotional for everyone.
Yeah. What is kind of, if there was one takeaway you wanted a viewer who walks out of the theater or after seeing it on Spike TV, what's the takeaway you would like them to have from the film?
I think Chris would just want you to laugh. His memory should be one of just laughter. He left behind a great body of work. And I think if you look back at Tommy Boy, they're running it on Spike TV all day today, all of his movies, and it's Chris Farley Day. I think if you look back at his body of work, that's what he'd want you to remember. You know, he worked very hard at what he did, and he loved to be an actor, so just remember him that way more than anything, yeah.
Yeah, watching the documentary just immediately wanted me to watch Tommy Boy. Like, I pretty much went on Amazon and just rented Tommy Boy immediately.
Yeah.
It was great. We'll take questions from the audience now.
Hey, good afternoon, gentlemen.
Hey.
Hey. So I have a question for you. Of all the things that your brother has done, personal and professional, can you tell me what you admired most about him?
I think just his commitment to his craft. I think people don't understand. He worked hard, and he really loved what he did. And when he stepped on a stage, he took it very seriously, and he committed to the characters, and he really believed in what he was doing on stage at Second City and at SNL and all of his movies. He really worked hard at them, and I think people don't. I think he has an image of like a party guy or whatever like that, but you don't get to his level with partying too much. I mean, he really worked hard at it, you know, really, really did, and he committed to it. He was a very dedicated artist.
It is interesting to see the development, especially of like Matt Foley, inspirational speaker, because in the film you see, you know, this was a character at Second City that people would line up for. People would come from all around town because they know it would be happening, and it's great to see him work on that character and build on it until it gets to SNL.
Yeah, he worked hard on it. It developed it and really tweaked it, and then you see the final version, but
right,
it took a long time to get there.
Yeah,
a lot of work.
We've got one over here.
How you guys doing? Your brother was one of the few comedians and perhaps one of the last to truly transcend and become ubiquitous throughout the entertainment industry. SAT word. Why do you suppose this occurred? And what do you think that X factor continues to be? I mean, this was before the internet, YouTube, Facebook, etc. So.
Want to take a crack at that one?
Yeah, for sure. I think the thing with Chris Farley is you look at these characters, these Midwest guys that he used to play, big and full of life. It almost doesn't have like an expiry date on it because of how vulnerable he was and how he related to people. And that's going to continue forever. You can watch Tommy Boy now, and actually you could probably watch Tommy Boy now and love it more because it got canned when it first came out. Black Sheep did as well. But these films have become iconic films. He's a comedy legend now. And the older we get, the more we get into a new genre of comedies, he's going to last because of that. Because he speaks to people. He speaks to the common man.
I also think that nowadays comedy's changed. Comedy's become more shocking. There's been a lot of influences comedy, like Richard Pryor and that. And some political comics out there that want to talk and be shocking and be controversial and say things on stage that are going to shake you out of your seat. And he didn't come from that angle. He came from the clown angle, which is not seen as much today. You know, I mean, Jackie Gleason in the old days, you know, they would have clowns and that kind of thing. But he came at it from a different angle. He didn't want to be political. He wasn't going to swear. He wasn't going to do anything like that where... or an angry comic. He wasn't an angry guy, and he wasn't going to say anything giantly socially, some social comment. He was never going to come up with that. That's not what he wanted to do. He wanted to be like an every person clown. He liked clowns too, so he really did. So that's kind of the angle he was coming at, which I think is timeless, and it's more innocent. And it's just coming from pure comedy, pure humor.
Oh, we got another question right up here.
Kevin, what was the hardest part for you as his brother in making this film?
Oh, just, it brought up a lot. As time goes on, I don't know if anybody's ever lost anyone close to them, as time goes on, time heals all wounds. But then when you revisit this stuff, it sort of makes it all fresh again. So, yeah, I had a few meltdowns, as they say, but you bounce back up and you keep going. Yeah, it just brought back a lot of the rawness of it all. But I think it was good. I think people will enjoy it, and I think it was, at the end of the day, when they watch this thing, they're going to really just know who he was, and it's an honest portrayal of who he was, which is great. And I feel proud about that.
I think there's, from speaking about Kevin specifically, I mean, he was incredibly brave. Not only did he take us back to Madison, introduce us to the family, and sort of trace the path of Chris's early beginnings, but then he sat with us for his interviews and continued to be part of the film. And I can tell you that really each one of the Farley family deserved a lot of credit. They were incredibly brave. And when Kevin received the cut of the film to watch, which he had not seen it being composed, watched it for the first time, there was this lag of time where we didn't hear from him. And when he finally called, he said, I watched the film. It took me 4 hours to recover. Pause. I love it.
Yeah, I did. Yeah, it took me a while when I first watched it. Watched it a few times now, so it's easier. But yeah, first time I watched it was real tough.
I think we've got another question right here.
What was the most interesting new thing you learned about Chris from making the documentary?
Well, you learned a lot, right?
Yeah, I learned a ton, yeah. I think the thing with Chris is that I think he's had a hard time in the media. He was, like Kevin said, he's always this wild guy or fell on tables, and that's all he was. It was almost like stupid humor, but it's not true. Chris had a lot of discipline, and he worked really hard to fall on a table. You don't see that very often these days, and that takes a lot of skill and a lot of strategy when you're a comedian. The other thing is how much of a devoted Catholic he was. He got up Sunday mornings and right after SNL, and he would go and he was usually here too. What's the church here that you would go to?
St. Malachi.
St. Malachi's, and he would donate his time, and it was a lot of work that people didn't know he did. We heard from, yeah.
Right. Talking about falling down on tables, one of my favorite little tidbits from the movie was Chevy Chase gave him advice to when you fall down, don't put your hands up to protect yourself because it loses the joke. It's not as funny. But what Chris didn't know is that Chevy Chase had usually some sort of supportive material on the ground so that when he'd fall down, he'd be okay. Whereas Chris just fell down on his face on the hard ground every time.
And then Lauren would be like, you don't have to do that, Chris. You can get a pad there for you.
As Lauren said, he was committed.
He was very committed.
Very committed. I think we might have another question back here.
Last question.
Hi, so I have two questions. One is, I remember I was fortunate enough to go to the SNL 40th, and I remember seeing you there, Kevin, and I was kind of wondering how that experience was for you and, seeing all of those cast members and how they, were affected by your brother. And second question was, did you guys find it difficult for the people who were in the documentary to try and open up about Chris? Like, was that something, or did they kind of just go right into those fond memories of him?
For the 40th, it was a surreal thing. I went with my little brother, John, and it was just surreal to go back to SNL, because I used to visit him all the time there, and just to see all the people, and a lot of people said nice things. Melissa McCarthy did a great impression of him on the show, so I said thank you to her, and I know that was a difficult thing for her to do, because I don't know how you're going to match that, but she did a pretty good job. And I just think that it was surreal. It was a surreal night. It was really intense, but great. And a lot of people said some nice things, And what was the second question?
Second about cast and did they open up?
Oh, yeah.
A lot of cast actually jumped on board after SNL 40. I felt like right after that show, it's like it brought up memories of Chris again and brought up just the SNL experience. And we had a lot of confirmations after that. I don't know if it was difficult for them to open up, but the interviews kind of started, and there was definitely a bit of a wall usually to start off, and then they would start to relive the 90s again, and they would remember Chris, and then they would kind of remember that he's not here, which is really hard, and then we would end it with some laughter and some great jokes, and they all have incredible memories about Chris, and yeah, they wanted to pay tribute to this guy. They were willing to share it.
Each one of them came, in many cases, the first thing they said to us was, thank you for making this film, about my buddy, my friend. And I wished I wasn't here today to talk about Chris in the past tense. We had so many great times together. This is going to be tough. And but then once they sat down, as Brent said, they got into it, and it was an emotional journey, and I think that's what you're going to see in the film.
Well, Derik, Brent, Kevin, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you.